We are now going to move on to our next speaker, Ms. Shweta Khurana. She's going to be talking about building an AI-ready generation. Shweta, of course, is a good friend and a long-time partner with us. She's the director of APJ Global Partnerships and Initiatives Group at Intel Corporation. Shweta, are you there? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be talking about what is it required if we want to build an AI-ready generation in Indonesia, and why do we need to do that in the first place itself? Why is it that today AI is taking such acute importance in all our discussions, whether we are talking about healthcare, whether we are talking about keeping people safe, whether we are talking about safety, whether we are talking about analytics at large? So what is AI and why is it important? If we just trace back to a couple of decades, right? 1980, I still remember there was this era where we wanted to compute or digitize everything. If it can be digitized, let's do it. This was an era when spreadsheets, Word documents were just gaining importance, where everybody wanted to learn technology, everybody wanted to understand how to use technology to improve their productivity in order to function better. And I'm not just talking about education at large, but even in the work environment. Moving a decade ahead, we all started focusing on networking everything. Let's get connected to the big bang network. So there were conversations around how do we network our devices. And when I talk about devices, it's not just the laptops or the computers or the desktops or the whatever we are using, but how do we create a network where we can share communication more effectively through all the devices which we use? A decade later, the mobility phase happened. Everybody started talking about building apps to make our lives far more convenient than what they were at that point in time. And another decade later, which is 2020, just recently, is where we started focusing on cloud. How do we cloudify it? How do we ensure cloudification can keep our data, our resources safe? But today, what we're talking about is something which is an amalgamation of all that we've learned, not just a couple of last decades, but I would say through the industrial revolutions as and when they've progressed. So we are talking about 100 billion intelligent connected devices being available to us. And there is a whole pattern of distributed intelligence. Now, why is this important to us? This is not just important to us because we are concerned about education. We are concerned about jobs of tomorrow. We are concerned on how do we develop our workforce, both current and future workforce. But this is important for us because we need to live in this environment. It's the way we live, the way we work, the way we play. So if you're going to be living in this entire system where we have 100 billion connected devices around us, I think what is acutely important is how does humanity, which is coming online, which is creating this digital footprint, handprint, network, how do we uniquely build and deliver on it? So in this era, there is this conversation where it says that artificial intelligence has the potential to deliver global economic activities of $13 trillion by 2030, which is 9 years from now. And Indonesia specifically is saying that the contribution which AI can give to Indonesia's bottom line or the economic growth is $336 billion US, which is pretty significant. So with AI everywhere, precision agriculture, optimization of energy resources, delivery of education. I mean, given the pandemic, the situation has changed, right? We were talking about disrupting education. Today, we are disrupting not only just education in entirety, but where do we deliver education? Children are working from home. They are trying to understand, learn, comprehend, and gain knowledge no matter where they are. People are working from home, so the workplaces have got disrupted. Governance, using AI for better or good governance. Finance, blockchain, analytics are not unknown words any longer in the terminology of finance. And it goes on and on. So no matter which industry do we all associate ourselves with. We may not essentially work with, but we associate ourselves with, no matter which industry. Do we really want to garner skills in? AI is an underlining component across all of them. So going ahead, if we talk about the way our world has functioned has changed, which means the future of work has changed, which means the job landscape has changed. Now, work tasks have changed. Tasks which could be delivered or can be delivered easily by machines are being managed by them. We are slowly in a position where we are handing over all the repetitive functional tasks to the machines to do. In turn, what we are getting is a huge demand of tasks which human beings, we as human beings, can do. And the human machine interaction in itself is a huge subject of study today. There is a lot of research going on how would human and machines correlate? How would they function together? What would be the association of what is it that a machine can do better and what is it that a human being can do better? And how would they work together? Or in fact, how would they work with each other going ahead? So there is a growing job demand, and those jobs are basically, it's not that many are new jobs, that's what we get to hear, but in many cases, the jobs themselves work. So let's talk about certain skill sets which are required, what humans do best, right? Humans can lead, they can improvise, they're brilliant creators, and specifically Indonesia, with my experience of being in Indonesia, there is one huge takeaway which I got back with me once I moved out of Indonesia, and I've spent almost 3 years there, was the level of creativity and ingenuity which exists in the youth in Indonesia. They can judge and they can empathize, whereas machines can do transactions. So whether it's one or whether there is billions and trillions of transactions which have to be done in a given period of time, machines can do that better. They can iterate, they can predict better because they have that capacity to process and synthesize all the data which can be made available to them, which would be extremely difficult for a human mind to do so. And that accordingly they evolve. They can make themselves intelligent as much as human beings can through the process of what we all know as lifelong learning. So there is this rise of fusion skills which is happening today between human beings and between machines. Let's talk about a couple of tasks. What are the tasks and how are they really taking a radical shift to understand what are the skill sets which we as human beings need to learn, not just at any age we may be, but also get into the education system. And that is how we build an AI-ready generation. So there were certain jobs like a videographer, right? Who would manually control his camera, adjust it to meet a changing environment, who would work on the settings. But in the future, our expectation is that the actual task of videography may be managed by a machine, but the videographer would be involved in how do you create an engagement between the machine, which is the intelligent camera, and between the subject, which has to be photographed or videographed, rather than just changing the camera settings. Or a bank loan officer, right, who today would manually perform calculations. He has to assess creditworthiness of applicants. But tomorrow, the assumption is that there would be AI-generated recommendations. In fact, a lot of insurance companies and banks have already started deploying that for loan approvals, where an AI would study the pattern of an individual and then define whether a loan has to be accredited or not. And the bank loan officer would instead then focus on how does he or she generate new value offerings for the customers. Similarly, a customer service officer. I mean, we all love to shop online, right? And we also know that when we shop online, the first level of interaction is with the chatbot. So at the end of the day, it's with the machine, but the machine cannot really resolve an issue directly. So instead of instead of letting a human being interact at the first level and spend a lot of time on basic interactions, which a machine can do, the human being's time is being spent better to actually solve problems which a machine cannot do. Similarly, tasks are evolving towards human-machine partnerships. How do they work together? But when human beings and machines get to work together in that world which we today are living in, which knowingly or unknowingly, we may not even have started deploying an element of artificial intelligence. There are a lot of emerging socioeconomic issues which we can talk about. There is a whole social contract at risk, right? The new age jobs which we talk about, data annotation, image classification, speech transcription, these are the new era jobs. Is there a social contract which is not being looked into while we prepare the future workforce for those jobs? There is a lack of diversity. We've all heard that the algorithms which are being created and run by multiple entities today, algorithms which can possibly enable me, for example, in the given pandemic, to get a hospital bed much easier than somebody else. Is there a diversity data set which is being used to build that algorithm in the first place? Or does it recognize me as a different entity which does not belong to the part of that data set? So there is a huge conversation happening between where do we get the data from? How good or bad is it? How clean is it? Or how do we clean that data? How do we utilize it to ensure that we take care of all the diverse occurrences which have to be looked into when we are creating algorithms to make our lives easier using artificial intelligence? Similarly, there are issues about fairness, ethics, bias, privacy, explainability, transparency, right? There are certain terms or certain notions which we give. For example, if I talk about education, a typical picture which an algorithm would throw up, given all the data set it has across the last 30 to 40 years, or maybe even longer, would be a teacher with a back towards the student teaching on a blackboard. But that is not the scenario any longer. That's not the way education is transacted. Similarly, those biases or those challenges happen across cross-section. Or are we talking about jobless growth? In the morning session, the Minister of Education in Indonesia spoke about, well, we can prepare the future workforce, but are there enough jobs? So are we really talking about a productivity paradox here? We're talking about jobless growth. And is our natural intelligence at risk? Now, this is not to talk about the negativity or the negative factors at play here, but just talking about challenges which would be there in any given domain which is emerging. And so is the case with emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. But what is interesting is the answer or the way to solve all these challenges lies in a concept which we at Intel promote acutely, which is called digital readiness, building digital readiness at large. So what is digital readiness? Right? We've all heard about digital divide. We keep talking about it. There are multiple conversations. People talk at conferences that there is a acute digital divide which we need to bridge. Fair enough. But somewhere down the line, we've progressed from just bridging the digital divide to building digital readiness. Now, digital readiness is a combination of not just learning technology, but a combination of picking up the right skills, having the trust to apply those skills effectively, and ensuring that the application is impactful in a way that the solutions are more productive and more efficient, rather than just applying technology for the sake of applying technology. So it's a combination of three vectors. We're talking about skills, we're talking about trust, and we are talking about the ability of people to use the skills they have gained responsibly. And when I say responsibly, it is for larger socioeconomic benefits, which is specifically important when we talk about emerging economies like India and Indonesia. So it's a very outcome-driven approach. It's not just I learn a skill, I can pick up, let's talk about AI. I can pick up AI online in any of the portals today in flat 30 minutes and say, yes, I know AI. But am I digitally ready? Am I ready to live in an AI world? Perhaps not. Because do I trust what I can possibly create after what I learned? And can I use it effectively? Those are the questions which we keep asking ourselves. So digital readiness is going beyond the traditional concept of digital access and inclusion, or going beyond the concept of really just bridging the digital divide. It is trusting the skills which we've learned and being in a position to use them effectively. And this is a key component of what Intel has announced as the 2030 strategy. So there is a commitment which Intel made last year, which says that we would be expanding digital readiness across the globe. 30 country government partnerships with 30,000 institutions, providing them access to AI tools and skilling or empowering 30 million people globally for current and future jobs. This is to meet the 2030 commitment, and it's a very bold call to action with government partners across the world. And I'm really happy to share that Indonesia is one such partner. We have a footprint of all our initiatives under building digital readiness in 15 countries today. And Indonesia, of course, features in that list as on date. So what do we really do is the question, right? How do we build digital readiness, or how do we, again, going back to my key conversation, how do we create an AI-ready generation in any country? There is a complete portfolio which we have, that's our solution for building digital readiness, which talks about public awareness, which means every citizen should be aware of how to function in an AI-driven world. It talks about high school skilling. Intel AI for Youth is the program which we actually have. We've just done a pilot in Indonesia with the Ministry of Education and with the organizers, the Habibi Festival organizers. And this program is something which enables school children in the K-12 system, not just to learn the AI skills, but to be effectively able to use them to solve a challenge they see in and around their communities by applying and creating an indigenous AI project. Then we also have solutions in space of AI for future workforce or current workforce as and when required, and digital readiness for government leaders. The idea of expanding digital readiness is to make it completely inclusive, is to make it available depending upon the goal of the government in a given country and the audience requirement. So let's talk about AI for Youth for some time. AI for Youth is a program, it's an initiative which is typically used in the K-12 environment. And that's our mechanism of building an AI-ready generation across Indonesia and across the globe subsequently. The objective of the program is to enable children studying in schools, maybe grades 6 to 12, develop a deep understanding of AI, really demystify what artificial intelligence is, and pick up the required skill set and enable the right mindset to be able to understand, comprehend, and apply artificial intelligence. It allows them access to AI tool sets. So there are 3 critical parameters we focused on. Enable mindset, which can help them really understand not just the application of AI, how to live in an AI world, but even the pitfalls of artificial intelligence. Access to or creation of skill sets. Skill sets is what really would allow them to go through this journey and build their AI project, and access to tool sets, because without that, they will not be able to apply the skills they have learned. And then the youth go onwards to create those brilliant solutions of solving problems which they see in and around them in their communities. And shortly, we'll be releasing our report, which will talk about what youth in Indonesia have created after going through this entire journey. But more towards what do we really skill these youth on, or what is the learning journey? So the learning journey starts from how do we inspire youth to know about artificial intelligence. And just a disclaimer, they need not have any prior knowledge, not just about artificial intelligence, but about technology at large before joining these programs. So this is primarily meant as an AI readiness initiative. It is meant for youth who have no prior knowledge about artificial intelligence or about coding, or even would want to make a career in this stream. So we inspire them, we get them to understand what is it to live with artificial intelligence all around us. We get them to understand the pitfalls, talk about ethics, biases, all the socioeconomic challenges which I'd shared earlier. We get them to acquire certain skill sets, which are gets them to understand the three key domains of artificial intelligence, which would be computer vision, natural language processing, or using data for AI. We get them to experience going through certain guided use cases and then subsequently be empowered enough to build their entire solution. I'm not going to go through this. This is a lot of material to process, but just wanted to stress on the fact that becoming ready for an AI-driven future, as most of the speakers have been sharing since morning, it is not just essential to learn the technology skills, but it's equally essential to learn the social skills, or what we call as the core skills. And that is where throughout the journey, what they pick up is not just about learning what an AI life cycle is, how do we collect data, how do we process data, how do we clean data, how do we visualize it, things like that. Not only they understand about the domains of AI, not only do they understand the whole life cycle of how artificial intelligence works, but they also pick up skills of leadership, organization, collaboration, persuasion. A very skill which seems very simple, but is the most difficult thing to do, is sharing technology or a tech project in plain and simple language. And then, of course, they can demonstrate an outcome. That is what we have as an offering for the K-12 or the school education system. Going ahead, I really want to take another 5 minutes to talk to you about a new program which we have in offering, which is the AI for Future Workforce, which would create the job readiness, which would help people, enable people to become ready for the jobs of tomorrow. Now, this is beyond K-12. This is typically for the SMCAs or the vocational institutes, which again, no prior coding experience is required. But here the attributes become a little different, because we are talking about not just demystification of a technology, but we are also talking how young learners need to gain the technical confidence of functioning in an AI world. So it kind of focuses on picking up the skills which are related for employability and career growth. And again, it's a combination of both technology and social skills. Social skills like leadership, core skills like the Power BI tools, which today we as employees are learning ourselves to use in the industry. So much so that a learner who goes through this entire journey can produce an evidence of employment. They can really demonstrate a solution through the capstone project and have for creating industrial or social impact, and go through an internship as well. This is a new program which we're going to be offering to Indonesia shortly. It moves from getting aware about artificial intelligence, building the foundation of the basic career and social skills or career growth skills, experiencing the three domains again, but also includes a capstone which prepares an individual or a youth for an apprenticeship and a practical training and exposure. Now, we know because of the current pandemic, many times the exposure cannot be face-to-face, so we are looking at a virtual solution to do that as well. We will not go through the module summary, but I'm just putting it out there so that I can talk about this kind of skills, the length, the breadth, the body of knowledge which a learner would be gaining to be ready for the job of tomorrow, or to be ready to live in an AI-driven world. But like in the school education space, we focus on technology skills and social skills. There's another layer which we are adding out here, which is called the career growth skills, which talks about self-management, which is one of the most important aspects today for for having a job, right? How do we develop a growth mindset? How do we really use SMART goal settings? What are the kind of frameworks we work with? What are the social emotional skills we need to work with to prepare ourselves for careers? In fact, so much so, we even cover entrepreneurship as a part of this entire piece, because there is a level of entrepreneurship or the entrepreneur skills one needs to showcase in a work environment today. With this, I just want to end my presentation here. not go into the details of application, I have a lot of examples to really talk about how students in Indonesia have picked up AI for Youth, the kind of projects which they are creating and building. But we would be sharing that subsequently. But I want all of you to experience what I've spoken about. But the whole idea to actually just get you to experience this entire piece was to reiterate the fact that every time you book something on Gojek, or you go to Tokopedia, or you use an app to improve the quality of your life, save time, source something, you're actually interfacing with AI, which means all of us need to be ready to live in an AI-fueled world, which means that the future generation needs to be geared up for artificial intelligence, not just to be a consumer, but also to understand how to live efficiently and effectively in an AI-driven world. With this, thank you so much. And it's back to you, Shoaib, Nalin.
That was indeed very exciting. I think the game really gave us a good idea of what AI can do and how it works. And thank you for your presentation.